Perfect. So May, do you want to give an intro? May was a part of our judging panel. Is she there?
Hi guys, yes, I am here. It was I had that notification meeting was being recorded and I wasn't going away. Hi guys, my name is May. I'm the managing director of the Content Factory and our other ventures as well. And we're very, very happy to be taking you guys through or accompanying you guys on this journey. We have a lot of learnings from the first season of BBI. So for us, it's going to be a matter of instilling kind of those learnings within the program this year, and I'll be happy to assist you guys on anything that you might need, be it on content or performance, etc. So you guys can just get in touch whenever, and we'll take it from there.
Amazing, thank you. Oh, Rosemary, no. I'm so sorry. Do please. Sorry. Before I go on to the Content Factory,
you're not that much of a morning person, I must say. Yeah. So I'm just Rosemary. Nice to meet you all. I'm the founder of Salma Loves Beauty, which is a natural hair care and body care line inspired by Mediterranean nature. Most of our ingredients are sourced from Lebanon. That's where our whole supply chain is based out of, and I'm excited for the presentation today.
Amazing, thank you. I do apologize. Thank you for messaging. And then Christina from Content Factory.
Hello guys, how are you? Lovely to meet you all. I'm the art director, working hand in hand with Danielle that you will meet as well. And looking forward to this session.
And then last but not least, our main host for today's event,
Danielle. Hello. Hey guys, I'm Danielle. So I think we've already chatted before, but I work as the creative director for the Content Factory. So like May said, we had a lot of fun working with BBI last year. We definitely got a lot of learnings that we're happy to kind of action into this cohort, which is great. Definitely speed up the process and getting things going once you have all of your products up on Faces and Beauty Nation. So we're very excited. Just as a side note, most of our team, well, we're all girls, and a lot of us are beauty buffs. So we love beauty. So it kind of makes this even more exciting. So yeah, you have May, who's like a super skincare enthusiast who kind of like knows too much about skincare, which I don't, but I love like makeup and beauty in general. I love things that smell good as well. So we're very excited to kind of be on this journey with you guys. I know that you guys are doing a lot of like workshopping this week and probably meeting a lot of people, and hopefully I am assuming that this is going to be the most fun session because it's a creative session. We're not going to be talking about like numbers or Excel sheets or anything like that. It's very interesting because when we look through all of your brands, a lot of you are like super established already. So this can kind of be more as like a refresher. We kind of just want to go over like the importance of owning your own brand story. Visually, how do you express that? How does that translate onto social? And then also kind of like the importance of having a content strategy. And we can kind of show you a case study on one that we've done. At the end of the session, we'll be able to send you guys across two different things. So one of them is a workshop that you can do independently with other members of your team or close friends, which is what we call a brand discovery workshop. We don't have the time in this forum to do it, but I would definitely push for anyone to do it. It's a very fun exercise. And then we'll also be giving you guys kind of like a template to create your own content strategy based on the ones that we'll present. So hopefully these tools can come in handy. Like I said, you guys are all kind of like ranging when it comes to like defining what your brand is. Some of you are like quite clear and advanced in where you want to be. Some of you are still a bit more in, I would say, the exploration phase. So hopefully this will just serve as a refresher and inspiration. And if at any point you want to ask any questions, like please feel free. Super casual discussion that we have going on here today. So you can interrupt me at any time, no problem. Do you guys have any questions before I start? No.
Yeah, all good.
Okay, amazing. Okay, cool. So I will go ahead and share my screen. Okay, let me just open this up. So, hello everybody. We are the Content Factory. Very excited to have you here today. What we're gonna kind of like touch upon first is brand identity. So a lot of you guys are new brands or more like startup brands. So kind of defining the brand identity is something that is super important to kind of establish at the get-go. Your brand identity is definitely very important, especially at this day and age where we're kind of exposed to so many different brands on a daily basis and so many different messages. It's definitely become challenging to kind of stand out from the crowd. But I think with some good branding and a great story, there's definitely space for everyone. I think when you're creating a brand, you really want to look at intriguing people, having a very like unique brand story. You want someone to kind of like remember your brand, and there's a lot of different triggers that can help do that. Kind of like 3 buckets that we like to always focus on is being unique, telling a story and captivating people. So of course, being unique can be kind of tough, again, in like a very saturated market, but small things that you can do is like, for example, creating something for your branding that's custom. So whether it's like an emblem or an icon or a set of patterns, I think working on these kind of like unique pieces that make part of your branding is super valuable. So for example, you could partner up with an illustrator who could draw something custom that's just for you. When you have your brand story, that can be kind of incorporated into these pieces of artwork that will already make your brand unique to others because you've created something custom for it. Also, there's the aspect of telling a story. So I think now more than ever, people are looking for brands that have a story. And really kind of like humanizing these brands. So whether it's humanizing it through the story that you're telling or through the people behind the brand or the purpose behind the brand, a lot of shoppers now are a lot more driven by these kind of like more emotional connections and knowing these stories. They kind of almost want to invest in your story, you know? So it's sometimes less about the product and more about the story behind this brand. Who are the people behind this brand? What is the purpose? Especially when we're looking at the younger generation, like Gen Zs, they really believe in brands that have a purpose and brands that can tell a story. So defining what your story is something that you should definitely all look into and communicating it as much as you can. And then, of course, we have to captivate people. So this usually comes in a more kind of like visual way or through copy is how can we captivate an audience with something that we like to call like thumb stopping. So what's something that's going to make them stop scrolling and kind of look at your content or pay attention to your brand. So being kind of like bold, having your own identity, something that can really captivate people is something to consider when you're building your brand. A kind of document that we look at creating at the beginning of a brand creation is what we call a brand platform. Sorry, guys, this is my dog, Gigi. She's a bit crazy. Let me just go and get her.
I have the same issues, don't worry, I have 2.
Sorry, guys, she's very protective, so she barks when there are people in the hallway. Okay, so when we look at building a brand platform, it's really kind of like defining what your brand story is. So through this exercise that we'll be sharing with you guys that you can do independently, you kind of want to build your brand platform, which includes things like your word cloud, who you are, what is your mission, what are the values of your brand. Sorry, guys.
My dog's barking now.
Crazy. 1 second.
Yeah, he's like, who's that? Who's that?
Sorry. She's interrupting me. Okay. So as I was saying, when you're building your brand platform, it's kind of like a base where you start all of the storytelling. So understanding what your brand values are, what do you stand for, defining what your mission is, being very clear and communicating who you are and what you do, and then also building a personality behind this brand. So for us, we always start any kind of like partnership when it comes to branding with the brand platform. What I'm going to do is kind of take you through the workshop. Again, like we're not going to do it in this forum, but it's definitely something that you can look at doing with other team members, friends, potential clients, anyone who kind of like you value their opinion. Usually when you host these workshops, we always like to have a mix of people who are involved in the workshop. So maybe it could be someone who doesn't know a lot about your brand, but they're kind of in marketing. So they kind of understand the importance of doing such a workshop. Maybe you have other team members that are super into the brand and know a lot about what you guys are doing. And then you could have like other professionals like marketeers or creatives that can be part of the session. I think it's always nice to have like some outside perspectives, because a lot of the times when you're working on your own brand, you become like very consumed in your own story, and having an outside view sometimes can kind of spark things that maybe you didn't consider before. So it's always nice to have a good mix of people. So whenever we're hosting a brand discovery workshop, I'm just going to take you through kind of like the questions or the activities that you would do and why we do them. Again, after this workshop, we'll be giving you guys these slides so that you can host this on your own should you want to. So the objectives of the workshop is really to define your brand and its value. So through the workshop, you'd be creating your word cloud, your mission statement, defining what you are, picking out your values, and working on your personality and tone of voice. So the first exercise is something that you do to kind of think of your word cloud. So you have like 10 minutes with a bunch of Post-its, and you kind of just scribble down all of the words that are associated to your brand. And this is kind of very open. It's kind of like an icebreaker. It's the first thing that you do. So there are no wrong answers. You just go ahead and scribble down as many words as you can think of that is associated to your brand. Maybe it's important for me to preface that when you're hosting the workshop, it's always nice to have a small introduction from the brand creator, just so that whoever is not involved too much in the brand can get an idea of your story and what the whole brand is about. So, and then you move on to the exercises. So the reason why you kind of build these word clouds, and this is something you do independently, is that you start to see like kind of like, what is the brand universe? Like, where do we sit? What are important keywords that are associated to our brand or our product? After that, you work again with Post-its, where you have like 2 columns where you have it is and it is not. This is where you start filling in some sentences as to what is your brand and what it isn't. So it is a sustainable beauty brand. It is not a mass production. These kind of different things. Also, when you start kind of defining what you are and what you aren't, it helps make it very clear, like how you can describe your brand to other people, how you can kind of define what you do, and also highlight some of your USPs. So a lot of the times when we're doing that exercise, you kind of see like, what are your unique selling points in the what we are column. After that, you can craft your mission statement. This is a great exercise to kind of like get you started on how you can start formulating what your mission is. So here it's a formulation of a sentence. So you start with as a, and then you insert your business or brand description. We aim to provide. This is where you insert the kind of like key target or your audience. With is where you insert a subject matter or a theme. And then in order to is kind of like the desired outcome that you want for you and your end users. So I have an example here of one that we've created for our online magazine, The Modern East. Again, it's not a very sexy sentence, but it's a place to start from. So once you craft this mission statement, you can definitely start fluffing it up or wording it in a way that is maybe more nice. But it's a good starting point to make sure that you kind of have all of the elements that you need for your mission statement. So for us, our mission statement was, as an online media platform, we aim to provide young Arab millennials with entertaining, fun, and relevant content in order for them to find their voice and self-expression. So this was kind of like the start of how we built our mission statement. I think here you kind of cover like 4 key points that should be included. And it's definitely a nice exercise for you to do for your own brand. Because you want to make sure that when you're working on your mission statement, you kind of have like the actionable points behind them, and that you're being descriptive enough, and that you're covering what you're doing, who you're doing it for, and why you're doing it. After that, we kind of start looking at our brand values. So this is kind of where the word cloud comes into play. You'll find that a lot of the times when you're building your word cloud, some of the words can kind of stand out to you as your values. So here, each person can kind of write down 5 to 10 values that they think represent your brand. When we look at brand values, we always like to use the rule of 4. So having 4 brand values, 2 of which are kind of like actionable and tangible values that you have as a company, and then another 2 which is maybe more emotional. So for example, one of the tangible ones could be sustainability or clean, because these are kind of like words that you can back up with the product. It's something that is very tangible. Then when we look at the other 2 values that are more emotional, here you can look at things as like inclusivity or self-confidence. These are kind of like what you want your customers to feel, and how you guys feel, how these products make you feel. Like, what are those values that are really important to you as a brand? So the idea is, if you guys come up with like 5 to 10 each, you'll start noticing, usually within the workshops, is that a lot of people have like similar sentiments and different words. So you can kind of start grouping them up on the wall with your Post-its. And this really helps narrow down like what your 4 core values could be as a brand. And having brand values is very important, because whatever is important to you or whatever your brand stands for, you should have it kind of like written down in paper, and this is what you should work towards in all of the different activities you do, whether it's marketing, whether it's the creation of your products. The brand values, they can almost serve as your company values, like what you stand for, what's important to you. So having them defined is a great exercise, because then, you know, whenever you're explaining your brand to someone else and you cover your brand values, they will automatically kind of understand what page you're on in terms of what you guys are trying to do. After that, we work on our brand personality. So once we kind of have an idea on what we're doing, who we are, what's important to us, having a brand personality serves really well when it comes to expressing your brand. So for your tone of voice, whenever you're writing copy, whenever you're doing a photo shoot, for example, having a personality behind your brand. So your brand could be very cheeky, or your brand could be very elegant and luxurious. All of these things are important to define, so that when you're working on your brand expression, it's very clear. The exercise that we like to do for this is actually quite fun. So the idea is that you imagine that your brand is a person, and this brand has attended a party, an industry party. So how does this person look? What are they wearing? Who are they talking to? What are they saying? Are they bold and dressed really crazy? Or are they kind of like the more empath of the group who, you know, wants to go into like not small talk, but deep conversation? So all of these kind of like nuances, when you start thinking about them and you start thinking your brand as a person, it really helps define what your tone of voice would be. So this is kind of like the last bit of the exercise that we like to do at the end of the session, to kind of define your tone of voice. The last part, which is a very important part, is building your brand personas. So once you've kind of defined what your values are, what it is that you're doing, what your mission is, and how you want to communicate. The next part is who you want to communicate to. So building brand personas is really helpful, again, across a lot of different activities. It doesn't just have to be for a marketing activity, but it can even be when you're doing product development. If you have 3 personas in mind, kind of all of these decisions that you're taking for your brand, you'll always ask yourself, okay, would one of my personas like this? Would all of them like it? It's always important to have maybe 1 or 2 of your personas be aligned with kind of whatever action you're taking. When you're working on the personas, it should always be a mix of who your actual customers are, so who you know your customers to be, and who they might aspire to be. So of course, we always want it to always be a little bit more inspirational, aspirational, but we also want it to be based on who we know our shoppers actually are. So when you're building your brand personas, this is where you can come up with like a name, a description. So for example, it could be Sally, who is the skin newbie, and she is 25 years old and she works in PR. Her personality is she's very bold and independent. So kind of like crafting 3 different personas that have different kind of behaviors, different kinds of problems, who can be connected to your brand. It's a great tool to have so that whenever you are making any kind of decisions, so for example, if there's an event happening and someone is asking you if you want to take part, you want to ask yourself, okay, would one of my personas be interested in this kind of thing? Am I going to find my customers there? If you're working on a social, the way that you're crafting your caption, am I targeting the skin newbie and I want this post to be very educational, but I want her to understand what I'm trying to say, So having the personas there from the get-go really helps with taking your brand a little bit further and developing it. So yeah, the point of that exercise is to know who are the key personas that your brand is made for. So that's kind of like the first chunk, which is defining your brand platform. So really knowing who you are, what your values are, who are you talking to, what is your personality. So all of this is what we call the brand platform, which is kind of like the first step that you have to do in kind of building your brand. And after that, we move on to the visual identity. So before I move on, did anyone have any questions about the brand platform portion that I just talked about? Or is it clear? Well, I guess it's clear.
Clear.
Okay, amazing.
Yes,
Well,
it is very
we'll be giving you guys those slides, and honestly, I would definitely push for you guys to do the workshop because it's really fun. And like I said, when you invite people who are maybe like not working for the brand or somewhat of an outsider, it's always interesting to understand what their perceptions of your brand are, and sometimes it can really spark something that maybe you never thought of. So yeah, I will send you guys those that deck with all the questions, and please let us know if you do host the workshop. We'd be very interested to see how
If
it
I
went.
can add something here, I think also a lot of brands that would have done this exercise or a version of this exercise think that it's evergreen, whereas we believe it to be a very reiterative process. So we would really invite you guys, even if you had done something around the brand platform or an exercise around this part of your brand book per se, to actually try and revisit it every 6 months, depending on how your business is doing. Maybe you've acquired new customers that have changed your perception on who your persona archetypes are, things like that. And yeah, so even if you have done it, there's no harm in kind of revisiting it and making sure you're on the right track.
100% for sure. Okay, so once you kind of have your brand platform intact and you've kind of, explored your values and what your story is, that's when you kind of like can move on to your visual identity. So this is definitely something that all brands should have. And actually a lot of you already have this. It's kind of like just setting some visual brand guidelines from the get-go. It's really important to always kind of like remain consistent. So by having this type of tool, this document, you make sure that your appearance on social is similar to how your packaging looks like, which is similar to how your products look like. Any kind of like marketing collateral that you have, it should all kind of be part of this like cohesive universe. So when you're looking at a visual brand guidelines, it should definitely always include like your brand mood, your logos, icons, colors, fonts, and then how this is like applicated onto certain different collaterals. So we've kind of like prepared a small example, like a best practice. We created this fake brand, which is called the Fashion Factory. It's not a real brand. It's just something that we crafted for these presentation. On how we believe like your visual guidelines should look like. So we typically always start these decks with a mood board. So when you look at the mood board, you're kind of already immersed in the universe of this brand. So with this one specifically, it's very feminine and natural and very muted colors, very delicate type of photography. So as soon as you kind of look at this, you're already getting a feel of where this brand is going and kind of what it stands for. Then you have like a graphic mood board. So how you want this to translate graphically. After that, we move on to like the branding assets. So you have your logo. Being from the region, you can always have an iteration of your logo where it's bilingual. Here you can use your logo either with English and Arabic or just English or Arabic only, depending on what your needs are. Then we look at the logo treatment on different colors. Crafting an icon is also something that's really nice. So you can have your main logo, but having an icon as well is something that can be super cool, especially if you're in beauty. I think printing icons on your product is always really a nice touch to have. And this is where you can get creative, you know, like when we were talking at the beginning about being unique, this is where maybe you can, you know, describe your brand story to an illustrator and they can craft something very beautiful that's unique to you. I know that one of you guys, Palma, has a very cool icon, which is awesome. But this really helps in like telling the brand story. Of course, for illustrative purposes, this is not the most sexy icon, but it's just to show you that you can kind of like take elements from your logo and transform it into iconography. Then we kind of like look at shapes. So with this brand specifically, it was more about circular shapes, no like rough edges or sharp edges. We were looking at things like having arches and ovals. And then the colors. So for the colors, you typically would have a color universe. So this is a large palette that you can use for many different things. When you look at your larger palette, you should always kind of pick up like 4 primary colors. So 4 of like the main colors that express your brand. Typically, these are used for any kind of like corporate branding, shopping bags, logo, kind of like the main components of your brand expression. We always like to connect these to specific textures or imagery that's important to your brand as well. So again, it kind of like really lets you dive into this brand universe. And then from the primary colors, you also have a secondary palette. So the secondary palette serves for creating a larger bank of colors that can be used online and offline, so that in the end, you kind of have a nice palette to work from. Again, these are all guidelines. So although this is like your color palette and your color universe, if you did want to explore using other colors, if they live in the same family, it's something that can always be used as well. After that, you have your fonts. So typically we always advise for a brand to have 2 fonts, one which is your primary font and one which is a secondary font. Depending on the brand, your secondary font is usually the more decorative one. In this case, for this specific brand, we kept it quite simple. And then you kind of look at the format. So now that we've taken all of these elements together, how would it look like if we did an invite, for example? This is how it could look. Or if we want to express this brand on social. So by the time we kind of get to the expression here, it's kind of like for us very obvious that it's part of this brand universe, because we've already defined a lot of the elements that you see here, like the fonts and the shapes, the icon that's used, the different color variations. And this kind of serves as like some templates that you can use for social or for different kinds of outputs, I would say. So yeah, that is the end of the visual part. Did you guys have any questions? I know a lot of you guys have a brand book like this already. Maybe some of you are working on it, or you can add more to it. So if you have any questions, or if you need any support from our side in building something like this, we're more than happy to at any point. Again, I think like having these kind of like two solid documents when you're starting your brand, which is the platform and the graphic chart, is super helpful, because it just means that no matter who you work with, so if you're working with freelance graphic designers, you just give anybody these documents and they'll already be like pre-briefed on different projects that you'd want to do with them. They're going to know like what kind of universe your brand lives in, what colors they can use, what kind of shapes. So it's really helpful to have these kind of tools from the get-go if you're building your website. This is something great that you can give web developers and designers. So establishing all of this and having it like concisely together in a document is super helpful for your brand. Did anyone have any questions about that part? No? Okay, great. I hope that the no questions is because I'm explaining it really well and not because I'm boring you. I hope that this is being helpful for you guys. Next, we kind of want to talk about your brand on social. So like once you've kind of established all of the foundations for your brand, how you're expressing it on social is really important, especially, of course, in this day and age, everything is happening on social, everything is happening on Instagram and TikTok and Facebook. So now more than ever, your brand expression on social is super, super important. It's really kind of like at the forefront of advertising. So this is really where you're going to acquire a lot of your customers, you're going to educate a lot of them, you want to entertain them, you kind of want them to buy into your brand. And social is kind of like the window into your brand universe, specifically Instagram these days, which we really look at like the hub of all of this, where it kind of lives. So we have some like 3 key pillars that are super important to consider when you're expressing your brand on social. The first one is, of course, to think social. So whenever you're creating content that is for social, it's really important to consider the format and the channel. So, you know, if you're doing an Instagram story, you want to kind of be doing it in a way where a client would, or a customer would be using Instagram stories. So live video, doing kind of like polls, using kind of like the platform as it's intended to be used is really important. You know, if you're on TikTok, you want to make sure that you are thinking in the TikTok language. And same for Instagram. So always thinking social and really focusing and paying attention on the channel that you're using and what it's intended for is super important. I mean, we can't anymore just take a visual and make it into a square and then also into vertical and use it across different channels, because they're all intended for different purposes. After that, there's the aspect of telling a story. So once you kind of work on your brand platform and find what your narrative is and what your story is, expressing it through social will be really important. So having kind of like an underlying narrative for your brand expression will be really important. And this is where you can kind of craft an editorial calendar that will help you express your brand story. It will help create different types of thematics and talking points, where your social channels become more than just an advertising platform, but really a place where you're telling a story, you know, you're giving substance behind your brand. And the last point is to, of course, experiment. So because social is, you know, we are consuming so much content on a daily basis every single day, there's no harm in experimenting. So you can try and do a reel and see if your audience will like it. It's not going to be damaging to your brand. If it's not that cool, it's okay, because again, we're like always consuming a high volume of content, and you'll sometimes be surprised as to what your audience will engage with. Sometimes an audience will engage with something that you've just shot on your iPhone very randomly versus a beautiful campaign that's maybe, you know, a really big investment and a big production went behind it. So experimenting is really important. Having fun also, social is supposed to be fun. So trying and testing out different formats and seeing what your audience likes versus what it doesn't like is better than being too apprehensive, you know? So we're always pushing everyone to just try, experiment, try as many different things as you want. You can always archive your content, you can always delete your content, but having fun and having this element of experimentation is great, because a lot of the times you'd be surprised on what works really well and what doesn't. In terms of formats, something that we can look at and advise for a lot of brands is, again, these three key pillars of being creative and bold, taking a multimedia approach, and then also going vertical. So these are like three things that we look at these days to see how can we stand out from the crowd, how can we make our brand more noisy than others, how can we, you know, create this thumb-stopping content that we were talking about earlier. So when we talk about being creative and bold, it's from a very visual perspective. So how can we create like very catchy visuals? Collage is a great way. Making sure that when you're on social, use a bolder palette. You know, make sure that whatever kind of content that you're putting out there from a visual perspective is interesting and it's fun, and it will kind of like spark some intrigue. Like I said, collage is a medium that we love to use because it definitely does the job, but there are other things that you can do. But always keeping in mind to have this like creativity and boldness behind the artwork is a great way of catching attention.
Also, sorry, Dee, to interrupt, but also it's no longer a choice to be thinking vertical after the updates that Instagram is about to roll out to everyone. So also it's something to keep in mind with how quickly the way we do social is changing, and to be able to always be agile and adapt to that. So, so good to keep in mind as well.
Definitely. So taking a multimedia approach as well is something that works amazingly on social. So now more than ever, like still images, it really takes a lot for people to engage with them. So adding an element of movement is really helpful. So one thing you can do is stop motion. So this is where you take like a series of pictures and you kind of animate them all together. Having small video bites. So even if it's just a few seconds, the idea of movement usually has people stopping and watching. And then also creating like fun graphic GIFs. So this is something that you can do with pack shots that you have. But already when you start seeing movement on the channel, it kind of, yeah, plays a lot into this whole like intrigue, makes the content that much more interesting. This also goes with sound, by the way. Of course, on Instagram, everything starts on mute, but adding a layer of sound onto these video bites or these multimedia formats is also really helpful. It adds, again, another dimension, you know, so you're provoking a lot of senses that will have people interested. And then, of course,
I have one question for the previous slide.
Yeah, of course.
The graphic GIF on the right.
Yes.
Is there maybe like a specific app or tool that you love to use to create these type of content?
So we would typically do it on like some software for designers, but there are a few great apps out there that can do these kinds of things that I can look into and share some with you.
Yes, that would be great.
You know, a lot for like video editing, but for these specific GIFs, I'll just have to check with some of my team. But there is a lot of tools. Honestly, a great one is Canva as well. Like Canva has a lot of templates for animations already. But you do have to be a little bit, I would say a little bit tech savvy, but with some of these tools, specifically like Canva, it makes creating a lot of these types of things easy. But I will triple check to see for this specific type of GIF if there's something to make it really easy.
Yes, perfect. Thank you so much.
No probs. So yeah, of course we have to talk about TikToks and Reels. Because they are something that is very important to kind of hop onto as a trend right now, because Instagram's algorithm and TikTok's algorithm are, you know, treating everyone who's kind of like using both of these formats. They're kind of like, putting your content more up there when you're using these new formats. So with TikToks and Reels, they're really fun. Kind of all you need to do is get yourself a ring light and a tripod, experiment and be scrappy. It's a really great way of like humanizing your brand. So even getting yourselves behind the camera, doing voiceovers. Here it's all about like quantity. So you don't need to worry about quality. You don't need to host like a TikTok shoot. It's just something that you can kind of like, be launching on a very regular basis. Immersing yourself in the platform is really important. So either with TikTok or on Instagram Reels, making this part of like your daily social habits really helps understanding like what the trends are, what soundtracks are trending at the minute, what challenges are doing really well. Really becoming part of the platform as a member of the audience really helps, because TikTok is a very complicated thing to try and explain to people who are not on the platform. You kind of just, it's either you know if you know, and if you don't know, you need to get to know it, because it's quite an easy thing to get into, but to explain it to someone, it's a bit challenging. It's kind of, you need to be immersed in it and really follow the latest trends. I've put a couple of examples here of like some cool beauty TikToks. It's super trendy to do ASMR type of things, breaking products, and these actually generate a lot of views and engagement, even though it's so short. When we look at like humanizing your brand, getting yourself behind the camera or doing a voiceover is also something that's great.
Since I'm a model and my face is quite literally my job, I do get to splurge a bit on skincare. I know it's not realistic for everyone, but in case you're looking to treat yourself, here are my top 3 luxury skincare products. I used to have terrible dark circles, and this peptide eye cream is one of the only products that actually made a huge difference in my under eyes. Ingredients include vitamin E and B5, which help brighten the eyes and reduce fine lines. After 18, your skin starts slowly losing its elasticity, but this hyaluronic acid supports natural elastin, which is the main protein in the elastic connective tissue of the skin, so it keeps your skin firm and youthful over time. Last but arguably my number 1 favorite is this vitamin C, B, and E ferulic serum. This stuff is like a wellness shot for your face with a mix of high potency ingredients that are all powerful antioxidants and help with so many things, including hyperpigmentation, fine lines, dryness. This is my secret to keeping my skin looking so dewy. I put it under my makeup every single morning. All of these products are by Dr. Laura Duggan Scientific Beauty and can be found at Sephora. No, this isn't sponsored. I just really prefer medical grade skincare. Comment your favorite luxury skincare products below.
See, so this is kind of like a great example of like humanizing the brand. There's a lot of educational content in there. She's talking about the ingredients, but she's talking about it in a way that's like very relatable and like you can understand it quite easily. And the way that it's shot, it's like she's just outside in her garden. It's not like a full-on production, but this type of content is really working very well because it's super relatable. So if you guys aren't on the whole TikTok and Reels bandwagon, I suggest that you get there because they really are a great tool, and it's making content creation kind of for everybody. The apps, they edit the content for you in very easy ways, syncing the music to your piece of content. So all of these things make it pretty user friendly, and it's very valuable. We have here like a small checklist to consider whenever you're posting or creating your TikTok/Reels. Using appropriate hashtags is always important, specifically on TikTok. Following the current trends, so knowing like what the current music tracks are, or if there are specific challenges out there. Collaborating with influencers or TikTokers is also a really great thing that you can do. So you can up your UGC, send people out some products and see if they can create a TikTok for you. Another thing that works really well is commenting regularly on other people's posts. So maybe you have a hit list of, 20 different TikTokers that you find relate to your brand. Going on their pages and interacting with them and commenting on their posts, it will have them interested in your page, but it will also help with the algorithm. The more that you're kind of like spending time on the app and engaging with the app, the more visibility your content gets. Posting often and regularly. So often it's not so much about having to do it every single day, but kind of like committing to, let's say, twice a week, and being consistent with when you're updating the app also really helps with the algorithm. Using TikToks and Reels itself also helps a lot. So often, sometimes people will edit the video outside of TikTok or Instagram through an app and then just upload the video. But again, like TikTok and Instagram will reward your piece of content if you use a lot of their functions. So if on TikTok, you actually edit the video through the app, use effects, use their music library, TikTok will kind of like flag this as a very well put together piece of content. And then they give your content more visibility versus others. So they are kind of like rewarding you for using their functionalities and spending time on their app. TikTok and Reels are also a great way to curate user-generated content for your brand. And of course, the most important is to be silly and have fun. So with these formats, it's really about experimenting. It's really about having fun. If you're in the beauty game, it doesn't mean that all the TikToks and Reels you do have to be about beauty. You can very easily hop onto like a dance trend, and people engage with this type of content, and it really gives a kind of like fun vibe to your brand. Here we've just jotted down some ideas for beauty brands. You could cover makeup trends, you could go and do some beauty hacks, you can highlight your star products, give skincare tips, take part in makeup challenges, do beauty hauls, do some ingredient deep dives. You can work on listicles, so like top 5 of our product line that's for the summer. ASMR is great, so like showing the textures of your products really up close. It has a very kind of like relaxing look to it, but it also really helps when you're trying to sell something in skincare. You're trying to convert audience online. Since they can't touch the product and smell the product, having these types of clips where you really see the product up close, you see somebody, you know, rubbing the cream in their hands, or you see foam coming out of a bottle, it really kind of like immerses you into the product itself. So it's a great tool to use for trying to sell online, where people, again, they can't touch and feel. Unboxing is also a great idea. A day in the life, so like a day in the life at your brand can be great, you know, so taking the audience into a sneak peek behind the product development process, or if you have a fun office space, like how is your team interacting? That's a fun piece of content. And then of course, dance and trending challenges is always fun to hop on. So you don't always have to stick with beauty content. You can actually participate in trending challenges. And again, Instagram and TikTok will reward you for taking part in what's trending at the time. Did you guys have any
Hey,
questions
Danielle.
about this part?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hey.
These are really, really good ideas. Thank you so much for
You're so
sharing them.
welcome.
Yeah, can you hear me well?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Perfect. I was wondering what would be the best way to go around creating, and from a time point of view, as like founders and owners, we're caught up with like so many other things, you know, that are perhaps more like for the time being, they're perhaps more important than brainstorming ideas and executing them. Would it be the best, like what in your opinion would be the best way to keep the marketing of the brand? I don't know, would it be to work with an agency or to hire like a small marketing team, and then also have this person work with the agency?
Yeah, I think it really depends on like scale and resources, because when we're looking, for example, if we're looking at social content, things like TikToks and Reels, it's a platform that's been created for like a very young generation. You have a lot of these Gen Zs who are like social natives, like they understand the platform in and out. So of course, for yourselves as founders, it will be very challenging, first of all, to immerse yourself in the platforms if it's not something that's part of your day-to-day or your social habits. But you can definitely find, for example, we hire a lot for these type of social roles, interns on rotation. So you can find somebody who is maybe studying marketing, or somebody who is a beauty enthusiast who's obsessed with TikTok and Instagram. You can hire them as an intern, or you can work with them on a freelance basis. Maybe you have a deal with them where, let's say, once a month you send them 3 or 4 products and they create 4 TikToks for you. This is a great way that it could work with a freelancer. If you want to kind of like really hype up the frequency and be active on social on a daily basis, you can hire an intern, because with social, the younger, the better, because they actually understand the platforms. They are very native to it. They would be able to kind of upkeep these social channels for you. Without any kind of issues. And when you have the interns, it can either be like a paid internship.
Yeah, of course. We're actually hiring 2 interns for the summer. So
yeah, honestly, they're great. They're great because they're also hungry. They have a lot of ideas. Of course, it depends on the profile. The best type of profile that you can find, which are these unicorns, who are the people who are creatively savvy, but also super into social, or somebody who studied social, but they're very interested in the creative aspect of it, because now we have a lot of tools at our fingertips that are just from an iPhone that make video editing really easy, graphic design really easy. So a lot of the times when you look at this younger generation, they're very tech savvy. They know, okay, you show them an app, after 2 or 3 days, they're going to know how to use it. So it's more about their personality and having this kind of like creative flair or connection to your brand. But this is a great way of like upkeeping your social. When you have a large scale and you are ready to have more resources on the project, this is definitely where you can work with an agency. If you want to do like a marketing strategy and a content strategy, and this is where kind of like a lot of performance comes into play. This is where you can work with a fully fledged agency that will take care of social from organic and performance. They can do for you copywriting. This is where you can kind of go across a lot of different touch points that maybe you wouldn't be able to do with just, a couple of creatives in-house or an intern. So it really depends on like what stage you're at and what kind of like financial commitments you're prepared for. But definitely if you have to scale down, it's possible. If you're ready to scale up, again, it's possible. I think for a lot of the types of brands that we're looking at with you guys, boutique agencies are definitely the way to go. You don't want to end up with like a really large agency that have a lot of processes and they probably take on a lot of different clients. When you're working more with a boutique agency, this is where you can kind of like, first you want to feel very connected to the agency. You want to make sure that they understand your brand and that they have a lot of time to dedicate to your brand with the appropriate resources. So yeah, I think all of them work. It depends at what stage you're at and what your financial capabilities are. But definitely staying silent shouldn't be the option. You should definitely always be communicating as much as you can, having a lot of fun on social, expressing your brand. These are all really important. And when it comes to freelance resources or interns, I would always recommend to have one creative and one social. So maybe one graphic designer, one social media intern. But the two of these, when you bring them together, they can do a lot of great things for your brand on social.
I love it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome so much.
One creative and one social, which is one graphic designer and one more marketing focused.
Exactly. Yeah. One social media executive, this person is going to do stories every day. They're going to.
And the graphic is going to put the content together.
Exactly. Yeah. So, if the social person, again, like if you're doing stories, the best way to do it is to actually film the same way that we do our stories, So for example, this person could be visiting your production house where people are creating the products and they're like, okay, today I'm going to show you behind the scenes of making this soap. Maybe they can do small like interviews with the people who are working on the products, all of these kinds of things where for stories, it's more like live and an insider view. Or it could be doing a poll. So, okay, we're thinking of doing a new soap. Like we have these two these two scents. Which one would you prefer? This type of content works very well for stories. But then if we're looking at Instagram and let's say you have a promotion and you want to do an artwork, you have the graphic designer who will be able to take on this task. you know.
Brilliant. Thank
Yeah.
you.
You're welcome. Did anyone have any other questions about the
Yeah.
part on your
Unless
job?
I've been on mute. Which schools do you guys recruit for yourselves that you could recommend?
Honestly, if we're looking at the UAE, I highly recommend students that come from AUS, so the American University of Sharjah. They have very strong design programs. So all of our best children, which we like to call them, are from AUS. You can find some great ones as well from the American University in Dubai, but in Sharjah specifically, they have very strong art programs. They actually have a program called Design Management. This is where the creatives actually get to do creative courses, but they also do business and marketing. So you find a lot of like very well-rounded creative profiles or marketing profiles that are creatively inclined. So yeah, AUS is a really great one. Julie, who's on the call right now, she started as an intern with us, but now she is a multimedia designer and she is from AUS. But yeah, they have really great profiles
Like,
there.
send us your friends. Jobs.
Yeah, they have a lot of talent coming from AUS specifically. Yeah.
Very cool. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Anytime. Any other questions? Okay, cool. I'll go into the last part, which is building a content strategy. So sometimes it can be like very overwhelming when we have a lot of ideas and we want to be doing a lot of things. And then it kind of can become overwhelming that like we just don't want to do anything because we don't really know where to start. So this is where building a content strategy really helps make things very clear, quantifying what you want to do, putting things into a calendar. When do you want to do them? Having a content strategy is really a great tool because a lot of the time with content production and creation, everything can kind of be like automated. So for example, instead of being very overwhelmed by social, you can very easily dedicate 2 or 3 days at the beginning or at the end of the month, gathering together the content that you want to promote, crafting all of your captions, putting it onto a platform, and then your social kind of runs itself. It's more in the planning. So although it is a creative practice, having planning behind it makes it a lot easier and less daunting. And this kind of all starts with the content strategy. So for us, building a content strategy when we're working with clients on kind of like long-term projects, we always start with building the content strategy. So when we're looking at building a content strategy, we also need to make sure that first we have our business strategy, which is kind of like overarching. This really has like the most important direction for the brand. Then based on your business strategy, you'd have a marketing strategy. And then when you have your marketing strategy in place, this is where the content strategy comes in. So understanding what your business is trying to do on a much higher level, what are some important milestones? And then with marketing, it's really identifying key periods throughout the year that are really important to us. What are some activities and activations that we're going to be hosting? And then the last part is the content strategy. So how are we creating elements that can support all of these key periods and activities? So definitely having a good idea of like where your business is going and how you're going to market it is important to have before diving into a content strategy, because we always want to make sure that we're creating content that's for a purpose, not just for the sake of it, or whatever it is that we're doing, it has an objective behind it that is aligned with the overall business strategy and the marketing strategy as well. When we look at the content creation, we always kind of have these 3 key principles that we are always trying to abide by, which is the first, creating something valuable. So we want the audience to kind of like get something out of what we're creating. Either they've learned something or they've been entertained. So education and entertainment are 2 like big objectives that we have behind content that we're doing. Also, we want to make sure that we're always remaining relevant. So we always want to make sure that the content is addressing the consumer's wants and needs. We want our audience to know that we understand them and that we get them. So whatever we're serving them, it should be relevant. So this goes within the content itself, but also to who we're targeting. What are we saying? We want to make sure that we're talking to the right people in the right way. And then being consistent. So being consistent is the most important for the branding part, like in the branding exercise. You want to make sure that the pieces of content that you're throwing out there remain consistent. You kind of want to be like instantly recognizable, whether it's a color that you use or a specific art form or something that kind of like, the more consistent you are in practicing it, the more it becomes relatable to your customers. And all of a sudden, as soon as they see something, they're going to know it came from your brand. So these are really three important principles. When you're looking at getting started on your content strategy, these are like some 6 kind of like steps that you can take into consideration. The first one is identifying what your objectives are. So of course, having a few top line objectives for the content strategy really helps in kind of rationalizing the content that you want to create. Every piece of content can have different KPIs and objectives behind them, but they have to be aligned with what the overall objectives of the brand are. Defining the key personas. So that's an exercise that, we would have done when creating the brand platform, but really knowing who you're talking to is super important when you're building your content strategy. Selecting your channels. So this, again, like you can't really be everywhere because there are so many different social channels these days. So maybe you decide that your focus is going to be on Instagram and TikTok, or maybe it's going to be only Instagram and Facebook and you're going to use Reels. But identifying what are important to you, maybe Twitter is important to you if you know that your audience heavily engages with Twitter. But instead of trying to be everywhere, I would select some like channels of focus that are relevant to your brand and put most of your energy there. Defining areas of focus. So looking at the different types of formats and the subjects and the way that you create content is important to define what you want to focus on. Like, do you want to be a brand that's very video heavy? Do you want to be a brand that is more educational? And so through that, you'll be doing a lot more like infographics and graphic work. Then defining your marketing moments. So what are these key moments throughout the year that would require production? What are your monthly thematics? And then the last step is to kind of visualize time and plan. So when you have all of the components ready, you can build a kind of like a visual calendar that will make the planning part easy. Again, it sounds a little bit daunting when you're looking at it just like this. So what we've done is we actually have a sample of a content strategy that we've prepared for another brand. And what we'll be doing is giving you this framework that you can use for your own brand, just because this is just a lot of words, but it's definitely helpful to see it in practice. So our methodology for building a content strategy. This is something that we created for a brand called Cones and Rods. I'll just give you a little bit of context so that we can all follow. But Cones and Rods is a Saudi-based brand. They design shades, so sunglasses and glasses. They have a very interesting brand story where all of their frames are inspired by different historical figures in the Middle East. All of their products are made in Japan with like a very specific type of metal for the frames that they use. So there's a lot of like talking points and interesting aspects to their brand. And they had a very rich story and they were facing the issue of not knowing exactly how to express it. So this is where we came in and built this content strategy with them to help them use as a tool for communicating their brand on social or kind of anywhere else. So the first thing that we always look at is kind of creating a universe behind this brand. So taking kind of like 3 pillars that are important to the brand and using it to start building this universe around the storytelling. So with Cones and Rods, we wanted to focus on heritage, innovation, and craftsmanship. So these were kind of like the 3 buckets and pillars that would serve as like the main creative and content universe for the brand. And so we kind of deep dive into what do these 3 buckets mean. So when we looked at heritage, it was all around the fact that behind every pair of glasses, there lied a story. It was inspired by culture and heritage that came from the region. Uncovering these stories and communicating them to the audience would serve as a big content source and creative universe for the brand. So the heritage behind all of them was something that was very unique and something that we wanted to make sure that we're constantly communicating about, so that the audience understands that they're buying so much more than just glasses. There's a lot of storytelling that went behind them. There's a very creative angle into how they produced these pieces of glasses. The next is innovation. So innovation was something that was very important to them in terms of the materials that they use. So the brand produced designs that are very unique. They kind of wanted to change the way we look at eyewear. And they wanted to kind of prove that you don't need to compromise on styles to support values of fair trade, sustainability, and ethical production. And it's shown through the stories that they tell. So even the way that they were sourcing the products, the way that they were being made, it was very innovative in terms of the material, but also the process of making these glasses. So innovation was something that we felt was a very key pillar that we could talk about. And the last was craftsmanship. So craftsmanship, they're very focused on the artisanal craftsmanship of the products. They're designed in Saudi, but produced in Japan. So they were really kind of playing a lot on, these are like luxury pieces. They're sourced with like high quality, top grain material. And so this was very important to them, the craftsmanship and the history behind the creation of eyewear. So here, what you could do for your brand is kind of think about, okay, what could my brand universe be? What are like these 3 pillars that can serve as like the beginning of the storytelling? And when you define them and have like a small paragraph around them, it starts to already make sense. Okay, something that's really important to me is the way that our ingredients are sourced. So ingredients is a universe on its own that a lot of content can be derived from. Maybe it can be about how you want the customer to feel. So it could be all around confidence. And this can be a main pillar. So, you know, giving women confidence and kind of like having a story around that through your product. So defining these 3 elements that make part of your universe already start making the storytelling be a little bit clearer, and you have a lot of different talking points. After that, we looked at kind of like what the objectives are. So what were they trying to do with the content that they were creating? What were they trying to do with their brand? The first one was creating brand awareness. The next was educating the audience and inspiring the community. So they wanted people to know about their brand. They wanted to express their brand story and their values to the audience. They wanted to educate the audience. So they wanted to do a lot of educational pieces around trends and fashion and some of their new products. And then there's inspiration. So they wanted to kind of like delight the community with creative fashion content. They wanted to inspire their audience on mostly fashion trends and things like that. So you have awareness, education, and inspiration, which were really the 3 core objectives of the content that they were building for the year. After that, we start looking at like the content pyramid. So this is the pyramid that we love to use when we're kind of defining the different types of content that we be creating for the brand, or that the brand will be creating, where you have your hero, your hub, and your hygiene. So your hero content kind of sits at the top of this pyramid. This is kind of like the piece where maybe a lot of production value has gone into it. This is where you kind of build a really beautiful piece of content that's really intended to build authority and awareness, express your brand values, tell your story. It's something that can be a bit more evergreen. So when you create this hero piece of content, let's say it's a hero video, the hero video is something that can last around a year or 2 years. And really the intention behind it is to show what your brand values are and what your brand is all about, what's your story. It's not intended to kind of like sell anything. It's really just to express your brand. Again, this is the one where you probably want to put the most investment in. You want to make something really beautiful, but you also want to make sure that it lasts a long time and it stays relevant. In the middle, you have your hub content. So the hub content is more about creating like very specific pieces of content with very specific messaging. And you always kind of like have an objective or KPI behind it. So the hub content is really great. For example, when you have sale periods or a new collection launching, whenever you're creating this content, there's an action behind it. So this is where when you're working on the creatives, you want to make sure that the call to action is obvious, whether you want people to shop the new collection or if you want people to unveil a discount code or a kind of action that needs to be taken behind this piece of content. There's always a commercial objective behind it. You want people to go onto your website, you want people to buy a new product. So this is what we call the hub content, which is more tactical, I would say. And then the hygiene, which sits at the bottom, is the always on. So like, what are we talking about on a daily basis? How are we engaging with our community? Are we entertaining them and educating them? This is kind of like something that is, again, always on and can work very well with an editorial calendar. So for example, during the summertime, you have this underlining theme of like how they can use your products during the summer, or if it's all around summer wear. And then when it's the festive season, the editorial calendar changes to, you know, gifting and things like that. So this is where you can really have a lot of fun with your brand and build this calendar of thematics that you can use to kind of tell stories throughout the year. And its intention is not to generate sales or to have a call to action behind it. It's really just to engage with your audience and build this brand story that's there on a daily basis. So yeah, I kind of just went over those three, but this is some like examples. So in the hero, you have like this beautiful video. The hub content, you can see new in, there's a very clear call to action. Hygiene is just something where maybe in the caption, there's more of a storytelling aspect behind it, but through this, you can see that there isn't any specific call to action. So once we kind of have this organized, we move on to the different content types. So here we see like what are the different types of content that can fit within the brand. Defining 12 different types of content can be very helpful because then when you're building your content calendar, you're never kind of like stumped on ideas. You can always refer back and see, okay, we've identified these different types of content, like what can we work on for next month. So here, one of the first things we do is define like how much of the content will be owned and how much of it is curated. So owned content, meaning content that you've prepared for yourself, that's very brand specific. It's something that you've shot or that you've created yourself. And then curated content is a great way to kind of like have fillers. So curated content can be mood visuals, illustrations, different types of artwork, user-generated content. It's basically like curating content that's already out there and that exists and using it within your own social channel. So here we did a split of 60-40. So 60% was owned and 40% was curated. When we looked at the different types, we looked at model photography, product photography, and lifestyle photography. So these are all great things to have. We always recommend for brands to work on like content libraries. So having a lifestyle shoot where you can build a really big library of content in one day is great. Same thing with model and product photography. So hosting a one-day photo shoot, but getting as many assets as you can out there so that this is part of like your evergreen content library. It's not like too themed. It's just something that you have that's a library of imagery that works for your brand. Then we look at like campaign videos as another type of content that we can work with this specific brand. One of them that we identified was like product details. So we were actually taking the sketches of a lot of their items and adding details on them, as well as in the captions, because they had a lot of this storytelling where each of the shades were inspired by a different historical muse. We wanted to have a type of post that's just about those historical muses to use as like a storytelling piece. So how can we get like archival content or like historical content and talk about the profiles behind the different shades and what did they do? Then we looked at having illustrations. So having like fun graphic illustrations that is all around the world of eyewear. Quotes as well. So quotes is a really great filler. It's a nice type of like mood visual that you can have in there that helps express your brand. And then we have mood visuals. So this is something that's really cool. You know, different types of visuals and mood boards that inspired the production or the design of your products. It gives a certain feel. So with Cones and Rods, everything was like very like minimal. They were inspired a lot by like modern architecture. So these are the types of visuals that you can add into Instagram that really help give a vibe. And then we looked at like having pieces of content that's all around the different collections, sale messages, launch of new products. And then here we have a menu of some other ideas. So like how it's made, what's new, if you want to do interviews, you want to go over eyewear trends, quizzes, testimonials from clients, quotes, behind the scenes, inspirational art, landscapes and architecture. So again, like this is really to serve as when you're building your monthly calendars. If you're stumped on some ideas, you can always come back to your content strategy. Maybe if you don't want to use the 12 that you've identified as your main ones, you can come to this library of ideas and it would maybe spark something to inspire you. After that, we looked at like formats. So like, what are the type of formats that we're going to be focusing on mainly to keep the content fun and innovative and dynamic. So here we identified videos, images, GIFs, carousels, infographics, and illustrations. So these were like the 6 formats that we were looking at to focus on. And then we wanted to look at some more creative formats. So like GIFs, for example. So here, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, having like a multimedia approach. So having a simple idea, here you can like reuse your campaign images, but in a fun way. So GIFs was something that we wanted to propose for them to use. Illustrations. So in the world of eyewear, there was a lot of very interesting illustrations of eyes that we thought were really cool that they can introduce as a nice format. And then it comes to kind of putting it all together. So like, what is the look and feel? So here we have some mood boards on how we kind of express all of those ideas so that you can start to visualize the worlds that this lives in. So here for them, it was like very minimalistic, very monochromatic in the more like gray tones, but it kind of gives a visual universe. So for them, we identified that we wanted to keep it very graphic, modern, and minimal. These were like the 3 main content buckets that we were looking at from a visual perspective. And then this is kind of like how it looks when you put it all together. So here you see kind of like their Instagram grid has a mix of all of the different things that we were looking at. So it has the quotes, it has a mood visual, it has different types of photography. There's a sale message in there. You have a quote and you have an illustration. So having a nice and healthy mix of different formats and different types of content will make the page kind of more engaging, interesting to look at. When someone comes onto their Instagram, I think right away you get a really good grasp about what they're trying to do, how they're positioning themselves. So yeah, having kind of this look and feel that you have within your strategy really helps to make sure that from a visual perspective, you're always kind of on the right track. After that, we look at the tone of voice. So how is the brand expressing itself? What's the tone of voice? So here we identified like 3 directions where it's informative, transparent, and detailed. So, you know, for writing a caption about the products themselves, we want to be very detailed. We want to be transparent with the materials that have been used. We want to be bold, direct, and innovative. So the way that we're speaking, we want to come across bold and assertive, very sure of ourselves. And then we also wanted to have an aspect of being trendy, being fashion experts. So using a little bit of like fashion language here and there, making sure that we're always communicating in a trendy way when it comes to fashion specifically. And then we were just looking at like the key messages. So like what is important to always keep in mind? What are like 4 key messages that we always want to be expressing? And this is where we had the collection and the product details are very important as a message. Sustainability and materials is very important. Innovation in art and fashion, and culture and heritage. So these were kind of like very important messages to define. So again, having this strategy put in place can be a very useful tool. It's kind of like laying all of the groundwork as to who we are, how do we want to express ourselves, what kind of content do we want to create. When you have this, you really have like a very clear idea on the type of content that you want to be creating. You've identified 12 different kind of templates that exist there that you know you want to kind of like produce. You have a library of ideas, you know what your tone of voice is, what the key message is. So when you're building your content calendars, you always have the strategy to refer to where you kind of know what type of track you're on. So what you want to do is after you've finished your content strategy, which is kind of where a lot of the groundwork goes into place, this is where you can start planning. So of course, again, it can be like very intimidating to have all of these ideas. You've put them down into a strategy, but how can you action them? So once you have the strategy in place, you know kind of what the big picture is. You want to move on to planning. So this is where you kind of want to look at your year. This is where you want to look at your production. So, okay, you know, we talked about the hero and the hub and the hygiene. So what is our hero moment of the year? Are we going to do a hero piece of content this year? If we are, when do we want it to launch? If we want it to launch in September, maybe we should start working on it in March so we can do ideation and then we can go into production so everything is ready for September. Then we want to look at the hub content. So what are some like tactical moments of the year that we want to communicate about? So this is where you have Mother's Day and Father's Day and Eid and Christmas and all of these types of periods that pop up and sale periods. You map them out on your calendar so that you can see, okay, in March, it's Mother's Day and Women's Day. So we want to do a nice activation around there. Then in summer, we have summer surprises. It's a key sale period. So you kind of start looking at the year and you know, okay, all of these key moments are going to require content. They're going to require creative. So you just kind of map everything out. And then that's when you move into an editorial calendar and you say, okay, I've defined all of these key periods that we need to focus on for the year, but what's our editorial calendar going to be? What are we going to be talking about on a monthly basis? So we usually like to have like a theme per month, and it really helps in kind of curating the type of content that you want to throw out there, what kind of stories you want to tell. So for example, now it's the summer. So maybe in June, we want to talk all about like the summer heat and how this affects your skin. What kind of hydration products do we want to talk about? Then maybe when we move into September, we know that it's fashion week. So is our brand, can we talk about like trends for fashion? Like, is this connected to our brand? You start building like an editorial calendar where on a monthly basis, you've identified like an overarching theme that will help you curate the right content and be more like topical and having a storytelling aspect behind the calendar. And then you have a kind of like a full year calendar there that you can use to start creating all of the content, plugging it in, and then everything kind of goes live. So again, I don't know if all of this sounds like very overwhelming, but it's definitely helpful to have frameworks behind the way that you want to work on your brand, and then how you want to express it, what kind of content you're going to create, and then how you're going to launch this content on a yearly basis. Again, planning is like very key. So having these calendars in place are super helpful. It doesn't mean that you always have to go according to the calendar. Things are always happening and that's okay. But to have a really strong base to work off of makes the marketing part of the job just that little bit easier when you have all the planning in place. And that is it for our presentation today. Did you guys have any questions around the content strategy? I know it's like a lot of information to take in, but I hope I was clear in explaining it. But if you guys have any questions, please, the floor is yours.
Not a question, just a comment. That was such a helpful way of breaking it down and into kind of the different, the hero, the hub, and the hygiene. It's definitely given me a refreshed way of looking at the content strategy. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, anytime. It's my pleasure. I'm happy that that's helpful for you.
I just
Considering you're the CMO, so I'm sure you're very well versed in marketing, but it's definitely always good to get a fresher, especially when you're in it on a daily basis. It can become, yeah, a lot.
Yeah, you get bogged down in the details, but having this very holistic approach to it and having someone else's eyes on a content strategy, it always helps, right? For inspiration, and it's always changing.
Yeah, 100%.
I just had a question about accounts. So like we're primarily in the US, and obviously with the Beauty Lab, we're dealing with the UAE now, which is quite different. I think we asked this question before, but just to ask about it again. I think we were just wondering, because the holidays here are so different, the clientele is different, what they like. Just wondering, in terms of having separate TikTok accounts or Instagram accounts, like what do you guys recommend, or keeping one? Because we are a new brand, we don't have like thousands of followers, right? And so my whole thing was, if we start splitting accounts and we're splitting followers, we're starting kind of from scratch. So just wanted to know what your advice would be if we're targeting two markets or targeting two different kinds of people.
I think I can let May take this question. May, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Very interesting question. There's a lot of factors that would go into making a decision like that. First of all, let's all agree that social platforms, with the exception of TikTok is having its kind of own, I would say, penetration strategy now. Which might change in the future, but really there is a very, very low organic reach that you would get on the social media platforms as of now. So the idea is that decision can really be based on the percentage of paid media that you would do as a portion of what kind of media you're doing in general, or organic versus paid. And this will enable you to kind of make a decision on whether it is worth it to create a separate page for a separate market, or actually be operating from the same page and just personalize the communication that you want to do, or localize the communication that you would want to do in paid media rather than organically. That's the first thing. The second thing is also about, I would say, how you guys are envisioning the prioritization to be. Every brand will have its priority markets, and then markets, and then everything else, or all other regions or countries will come after that. So it's also worth it to think about it in that way. And think, okay, I will be targeting first and foremost this market, be it from a business strategy perspective, or from as a whole, or from a perspective of what your 6-month plan is, your 1-year plan is, etc. And think about it in that sense, because this kind of decision is not just about creating a new page, but also the investment that will go in from a time and budget perspective into actually personalizing the content itself.
Yeah, it's going to be a long thing to split, but I was just wondering. Thank you. That's super helpful.
Thank you.
Cool. Did anyone else have any questions or comments? Or again, like I said, it's overwhelming, but we plan on also giving you guys the workshop content strategy template, so that you can absorb it all and kind of work on your own. And I'm definitely here if you wanted to get on a call and take work on some of it together, or ask any questions. It's definitely possible. But if now anyone has anything that they wanted to ask or say.
Yes, I have a question. Is it maybe possible to schedule a short meeting, either online or in person, to really go through the brand assets, like really looking at the current brands and some tips and recommendations, like more personalized?
Of course, yeah. we can definitely
Yes,
schedule.
absolutely. We'll be working one-on-one with you guys anyway at the stage where we're starting to create your content. So this is definitely possible.
Perfect. Thank you.
I also have a question. Okay, I thought I was on mute again. First of all, thank you again so much. It was such an informative and great presentation. Really got so much out of it. One question about the content calendar that you were speaking about, because we do right now kind of what you were saying, like we, highlight key themes throughout the year that we can speak to. And that's kind of this master calendar that then is, has other aspects within social or email campaigns, whatever it is that we're focusing on. And right now for us, that just lives in like a big Excel document, which I don't know is the best way to manage it, because when things move, it's not so easy. So I was just wondering if there's a program or an app or something specific that you like to use versus or recommend using versus just an Excel.
I mean, for us, we actually use Google Sheets. So the reason why we use Google Sheets is just because whenever we have a calendar in place, there are a lot of different stakeholders that can go in and edit.
Right.
But yeah, we just have like templates for social calendars. We have like a deliverables tracker. We keep everything on the Google Sheet so that, because for us, of course, we work with our clients. So the clients can input information, we can input creative, and we kind of have this like back and forth. So we always kind of like have one tab where it's like a work in progress kind of document, and then another tab where it's the go live. So this is where the final creative is inserted and the copy. But it can work across a lot of different mediums. So you can have your master marketing and content calendar, and then different tabs for different things.
Right.
Yeah, we are kind of like in the same mindset of using sheets that we kind of like personalize ourselves. But then definitely if we look at programs, it's more of like a scheduling thing. So like Later is a great tool for scheduling all of your social content. So once you have your kind of go live calendar set, Later is a really great tool where it's super user friendly. Like you drag and drop the creative, you stick the creative onto a calendar, you input your captions and your hashtags. You can mirror the content onto different platforms, so like LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram. So once the go live calendar is set, some of our clients use an auto publishing platform like Later. Some of them still do it manually. I don't know why they do, but they do, some of them. Manual is great for like stories and TikToks and stuff like that. But for your social, we have our calendars, and then we migrate everything to an auto publishing platform. Other great tools that we use outside of Google Sheets for our calendars, we use Monday for project management, which is an amazing tool. And we use Slack for like communication between our team members. But yeah, for the marketing calendars and content calendars, we do use Google Sheets only because once you make a template and you can kind of like customize it exactly as to what you want, and then we kind of replicate it for other brands, or we custom make them depending on what we're working on.
Right. Okay. Thank you. That's very helpful. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Because I know we're going to be creating some content with you guys, which is exciting. In terms of sending product over to you guys and timeline on that, because I know we shared assets, but what about the actual physical products and timelines for that?
So I can give you like just a brief update on where we're at. So what we've done since the last time we spoke is late last week, or was it the beginning of this week? I don't remember. I think it was late last week. We had a call with Fahim, who is managing the Faces performance marketing team. We had a call with him to kind of understand how were the results last year from when we did BBI, what type of content was driving a lot of performance, and then overall, what kind of content is working well for Faces today. The idea behind this meeting was for us to understand, okay, based on what he's saying, our best practices, based on what works really well, does each of the brands already have a lot of this content that exists, or do we need to fill it in with content that we need to create? And then once we kind of like have done this audit, I would say with each brand is when we say, okay, we can fill in the gaps for performance by creating X, Y, and Z. And then with the remaining budget that we have, this is where we could look at doing some more brand marketing aspects, which this is then when we would come to you kind of like one-on-one and share, okay, we had this idea of doing with you guys. Are you happy to go in this direction? Would you want to do something else? If it turns out that the brand is missing a lot of content requirements that Faces would need, then probably a lot of the budget would go towards that. So now we're in the phase of like, he's just sent over yesterday best practices that works well for Faces, all of the concrete results of how performance marketing went last year. And now we're kind of going through brand by brand to see, okay, they actually already have everything. So for example, some of the things that they require is like 3 different lifestyle images, lifestyle, like product still life photography, product pack shots, short video bites. So he has this list that now we're kind of going through to see who has what. And then once we have this kind of made is when we can see one-on-one with the remaining budget. Is there something specific you guys want to do, or do we have an idea that we'd want to pitch to you? So we're still in this auditing phase. I know that in terms of product, we would definitely need samples from everyone. I know that there are some samples already in the greenhouse, but definitely if we needed more product, it's something that we should arrange. I don't know how long it takes to receive samples from you guys, if it's something easy or if it would be challenging, but I do know that there is already sample packs at the greenhouse that we could use if we needed, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so we have some of them, but not for all the brands. It depends on what you want to shoot and stuff like that. We have, to be honest, a lot of them, especially if we've only been sent over like a few, they're already open. There's palm marks and all of them because I'm showing anyone that comes in, and I'm also bringing it over to different teams, introducing the brands. So I don't know, it's not exactly like new product per se. So it's up. Yeah, I would say send more. Sorry.
Send more.
Yeah, no, because I anyone who comes in and they're asking about them, and anyone else in the group, which I'm sure all of the brands want me to do, is like literally take them out and letting them see and discover it and stuff. So I like having them here. So I don't know if they'd work, Danielle, for the shoots as well.
Okay, so then, yeah, I think definitely we would need to have some samples from everyone so that we can use them in the content creation. But we are still in this auditing phase right now to see what you guys already have that we can use for Faces, because our participation in the program, it's kind of like twofold. So we're here to support and make sure that everybody has the right content in place for Faces to use in performance to help generate as much traffic and sales towards your brand pages or the product pages on the website, of course, because everybody at the end of the day mostly wants to get a lot of sales out of this, which is great. But then there's the other part where it's more about brand marketing initiatives, us consulting on how we can help you and support you in any other ways. So this is where now we're going to have to just do the exercise and see, okay, from the bucket that we have with all of you, how much do we need to spend towards production on having like really strong performance assets versus how much do we have to spend on like brand marketing material that we can work on together, whether it be a product photo shoot, whether it be a library of GIFs. I mean, it could be, you know, a lot of different types of things. And our job would be to support you in a pain point that you have when it comes to creation. Like, how can we help you fill in the gaps of things that you may need or want at the minute? So hopefully we'll be done this exercise by like the beginning of next week so that we have a clearer idea, and then we can book in some time with each one of you separately to go through our ideas for how we can support.
Amazing. Is there any more questions? I'm just a little conscious of going over time. But it was super informative, and hope all the brands, hope all you got really good information out of it. I want to say a special thank you to the Content Factory team and Danielle especially for giving a really good session. Daniel, I don't know what way you want to work it, but if you want to send over to me documents or anything like that for them to do the exercise, I'd be more than happy to share.
Sure, I will. Yeah.
But yeah, I have this recorded anyway, and I will send it out afterwards. But yeah, thanks a million, Content Factory team.
Anytime. Thank you guys so much for your time as well and listening.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank
you guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll be in touch
Bye.
soon. Bye, guys.
Thank
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
Oh, bye-bye.
We'll be on later for the growth in e-com call, so I'll see you all again later.
Yeah.
Bye,
See you
guys.
later. Thank you. Bye-bye.